Chapter 15. Sully had taken a rather nasty bump to the back of his head. Nasty enough of a bump, apparently, to have rendered him unconscious for a few moments. It was as he swam toward the light, his gravity-laden eyes struggling upward, that he felt the bizarre licking sensation. Something licking him on the cheek. Not painful, more unnerving and strange. It felt like a cat's tongue, if a cat's tongue had no moisture. Sully's tired old eyes, despite protest, were able to focus. A diminutive creature was standing on his chest and happily wagging its tail. It was almost a puppy, but not quite, as it was made entirely of rocks and pebbles. The retired Commodore grinned.
"Hello there, little laddie,"
and patted the happy stone puppy on the head. Sully struggled to a seated position with a groan, the tiny mineral animal happily yapping by his side. Again, the retired Commodore pet the hybrid animal.
"You look awfully lonesome. Where are your owners, then?"
The rock dog barked, panted.
"Ah, yes. Well?"
Sully squinted as he peered around the artificial savanna, which functioned as the Jadoon's mess hall. He stepped forward and pushed the tall weeds aside. After several minutes, Sully and his rock dog were able to make it to the other side of the enormous stadium/cafeteria, and another communications console. This one, however, was not as damaged as the previous devices the retired Commodore had encountered, so he switched it on. The gigantic monitor slowly ground to life, lightened a dull gray screen which emitted basic glowing green text. What it read was a generic warning about using the console. Apparently, although damaged, it was still receiving massive amounts of data from the Perseids which would cause more damage to the ship, including navigation, communication, and the data core itself. It could be compromised if the terminal was active for too long.
"Bollocks,"
Sully grumbled through a cigarette.
"Won't be politic, love."
The retired Commodore pressed the button he wasn't supposed to press. At first, the information was incredibly generic. It was a basic biodata about the Jadoon. The fact that they ate mainly tall grass and weeds. To keep the food supply healthy, the Jadoon needed specialized insects to facilitate agricultural regrowth. Big space bugs. To keep the population in check so that the space bugs didn't overrun the ship, the Jadoon domesticated an off-planet breed of silicone-based canine, rock dogs. Sully bent and patted the pebble puppy on the head, causing it to bark and circle his ankles. It was after reading through the Jadoon profile of the ship and the habitat when things began to go south. Sully was taken aback by the amount of raw information which was coursing through the starfield outside. A whole planet full of libraries worth of data. Going against his better judgment, Sully opted to randomly bring up one of those files and press View. The retired Commodore then saw something he had not watched since he was a little boy. The commercial began in black and white, depicting a stereotypical 1950s pipe-smoking, eyeglass-wearing, newspaper-reading father. His son comes into the room looking a bit too much like the Beaver, and promptly starts shooting holes in his father's newspaper. The father is upset at first, but then smiles when he sees his son's genuine Mattel Dick Tracy BB action side shooter. After a few moments, Sully notices the copyright is from 1962, which he thinks is fine. The problem was they were in deep space, far, far from Earth. So why then, in the bloody living hell, were the ancient Earth commercials and radio shows being recorded by the Jadoon? After listening to the introduction to The Shadow and the Green Hornet radio plays from the 1940s, Sully had heard enough and opted to turn off the Behemoth monitor. He stared for about a moment, dumbfounded, debating on whether or not to continue downward, looking for more infected. He hastily drew a square on the side of the monitor, then turned to leave. He was surprised, and although wouldn't admit it, a bit more relieved that his new dog decided to follow him. The next level lower was incredibly dark and foreboding. Sully was happy he wasn't completely alone. The retired Commodore searched the level below the mess hall, only to find quiet, solitude, darkness. Same thing for the next level below, and the level below that. Sully was entering yet another abandoned wing of this massive, dark, awful ship. No sign of sickness, no sign of infected. He wondered if they had all died off. He marked an ample square on the side of the entrance, then began to head to the lower levels when the rock dog started to whine. It wasn't a proper whining. However, it resembled stones grinding together to make a scraping sound.
What's wrong, boy? Little Timmy caught in the...
The stone puppy ignored him and ran off. Sully tilted his head, curious, and wound his way back through the gigantic corridor. There were empty crew quarters, some doors open, some remained closed. The rock dog was barking from far, far away, echoing, urging Sully to follow. Eventually, the retired Commodore came up to the last in an endless row of small, confined rooms. This one was different, however, in that the windows were blacked out. The door was covered hastily in a yellow quarantine tape, and above the door was a single, bold X to denote the infection or contagion. The tiny puppy, made of granite, was scraping and clawing up at the door. Sully looked down and smiled.
You want in there? All right, laddie. I'll...
Just as he was about to touch the doorknob, he heard whispering coming from inside. Tentatively, he placed his ear on the darkened window.
I spy with my little eye something that begins with D. Dog.
It was a Jadoon voice.
I spy with my little eye something that begins with W. Wow.
Not a child's voice, but a child's boredom.
I spy with my little eye something that begins with D. Dog.
The rock dog was scratching the door and whining and looking up at Sully.
I agree. It doesn't sound good.
The retired Commodore speculated. The rock dog barked.
No, I'm not opening the door.
The pebble puppy whined.
Because I don't know if the rhino on the other side of the door is sick or not.
The silicone-based canine yapped once more.
No, I'm not Jadoon. I won't get infected.
The rock dog scratched the door.
Fine, if you insist.
Sully shook his head and unlocked the heavy door. It took all of his strength to push it open, and when he did, his little friend darted inside.
Oh, wait, you! You don't know what's in there!
He turned on the lights. Inside, stripped of armor and weapons, sitting on a padded chair and a straitjacket, was a Jadoon. The confined rhino appeared pleased when he saw the rock puppy come up to greet him.
Uglister.
Uglister?
Sully asked.
'Tis a horrible name for a dog.
The Jadoon stared at the retired Commodore.
Are we back at the site of proclamation yet? Am I cured?
No, I'm afraid not. And no.
Sully answered.
How long have you been down here by yourself?
The Jadoon boy shook his head.
A week I've been down here. For what? For liking the shows? And who are you anyway? Aren't you an earthling?
I'm human, yes. The captain had you quarantined down here by yourself for a week?
Yeah, and I'm right starving.
Sully nodded as he took readings from the Jadoon scanner.
I don't doubt that. Says here, you're all clean. If you had the infection, it's past now.
No, I wasn't infected with the virus. Captain stuck me down here 'cause I was liking the earth frequencies too much. Said I was a threat to Jadoon discipline.
The retired Commodore stared at him.
I saw some commercials from Earth. If that's what you're talking about. There were shows too. So, what are all these old signals doing here? Floating in space?
Only the captain knows for sure. Hey, who are you anyhow?
I'm Sully. Sully Brockwith.
He extended his hand. The restrained Jadoon looked down.
Oh,
The retired Commodore looked at the straitjacket.
guess you need help getting out of there then.
Sully helped the Jadoon free himself, and as he stared up at the monolithic yet intelligent rhinoceros, he was very, very happy and remembering that the Jadoon were herbivores. The rhino's gigantic hand swept downward toward the elderly earthling. He stated simply,
Bro,
Bro?
bro.
As in, your name is Bro?
Sully repeated in disbelief. The Jadoon stared down at him.
The navigator is Flo. Communications officer, the Mo. The captain is Crow. I am Bro.
Sully sighed.
Yes, that settles it then.
He started walking back to the main elevators.
Where you going?
The talking rhino asked excitedly.
Food?
I have a friend I want you to meet. I think maybe it's time we all go have a chat with the captain.
Came the response with a wink.
Sound amiable to you? Bro?